The alarm tore through the outpost before I even opened my eyes, and I already knew something had gone wrong with the egg chamber. I ran down the corridor barefoot, my heart slamming against my ribs, and when I reached the containment room, I found the thick reinforced glass cracked from the inside. Not broken, cracked, like something had pushed against it with terrifying strength and then stopped. Inside, sitting in the middle of the scattered shell fragments, was the hatchling. It was small, barely the size of a large dog, but its body was built like a weapon. Sleek muscle under dark gray skin, claws that curved like hooks, and eyes that glowed faintly amber in the dim light. This was a Vrskari, a species every survey report described the same way. Apex predator, extremely dangerous. Kills anything it imprints on once it grows strong enough. My name is Callum Ashby, and at that moment, I was the only person standing in front of a creature the entire colony had been warned to fear. I should have stepped back. I should have called security. Instead, I knelt down slowly, keeping my hands open and visible, the way you would approach a frightened animal rather than a monster. The hatchling turned its head toward me, its nostrils flared, tasting the air. Then, instead of lunging, it simply watched me, its body low and still. "Hey," I whispered, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to. "I'm not going to hurt you." It made a low sound, somewhere between a growl and a chirp, and took one careful step closer. That was the moment everything changed. Within seconds, the door burst open behind me, and two containment officers rushed in with stun rifles raised. One of them, a stocky man named Gareth Doyle, shouted at me to move away immediately. "Don't shoot," I said quickly, standing between him and the hatchling without even thinking about it. "It hasn't attacked. It's scared." "Scared things still kill," Gareth snapped, "especially this species. Move, Callum, now." But the hatchling didn't attack. It pressed itself slightly behind my legs, using me as a shield rather than a target, and I felt something strange settle in my chest. Not fear, protectiveness. "Look at it," I said. "It's hiding behind me. That's not predator behavior toward prey. That's imprinting." The officers lowered their weapons, but only slightly, their faces still tight with suspicion. Word spread through the outpost within the hour, and by evening, I was standing in front of the outpost director, a sharp-eyed woman named Priya Malhotra, along with 3 visiting Vrskari containment specialists who had arrived weeks earlier to study the recovered egg clutch from a crashed biotransport ship. "Every recorded case of Vrskari imprinting ends the same way," said one specialist, a tall man named Oscar Lindquist, folding his arms. "The hatchling bonds with its provider, grows dependent, and once it reaches maturity, it kills that provider in what our researchers call a dominance trigger. It's not malice. It's instinct. The provider becomes the final obstacle between the juvenile and full independence. That's based on how you raised them," I argued. "In cages, under control, treated like specimens instead of living beings." "That's based on decades of data," Oscar replied coldly. "Sentiment will get you killed, Mr. Ashby." Priya rubbed her temples, clearly exhausted by the argument already. "The safest option is containment or termination before it grows any larger," she said. "I understand the emotional attachment forming here, but I have 300 people on this outpost to protect." My stomach dropped. "You can't just kill it because of what it might become." "I can't risk it because of what it's guaranteed to become, according to every expert in this room," Priya said firmly. I stood my ground, even though my legs felt weak. "Give me 60 days, I said. "Let me study it properly. Let me prove the imprinting doesn't have to end that way. If I'm wrong, you can do whatever you decide. But if I'm right, you'll have discovered something no one else has." The room went silent. Oscar looked ready to argue, but Priya held up a hand. 30 days, she said. "Under strict monitoring. 1 violent incident, and containment protocol takes over immediately. Understood?" "Understood," I said, relief flooding through me even as my hands trembled. That night, I sat outside the containment room, and for the first time, I let the hatchling come close without any barrier between us. It sniffed my hand cautiously, then rested its head against my palm, and I felt the tension in my shoulders finally ease. "I'm going to call you Kestrel," I said quietly, "because you're fast, and because you deserve a real name instead of a case number." Kestrel made that same low chirping growl, and somehow, it sounded almost content. The next few weeks passed in a strange rhythm of fear and wonder. Kestrel grew faster than any of the specialists expected, nearly doubling in size within 2 weeks, its claws lengthening, its muscles thickening beneath its dark hide. Every growth spurt sent a ripple of anxiety through the outpost. People whispered in hallways. Some avoided the research wing entirely. But I noticed things the specialists hadn't documented before, because they had never actually spent unguarded time with a hatchling. Kestrel brought me small objects, scraps of packaging, smooth stones, once even a tool I had misplaced days earlier, dropping them at my feet like offerings. When a maintenance drone malfunctioned and sparked dangerously close to me, Kestrel knocked it away with a swipe of its claw before I even registered the danger, then looked at me with what I can only describe as concern. "It's not testing dominance," I told Priya during one of our weekly reviews. "It's testing whether I'm safe, and it's trying to keep me safe in return." "Or it's establishing territory," Oscar countered, still skeptical despite the data I was recording daily. "Predators guard what they consider theirs. That includes prey they intend to consume later." "Then explain why it hasn't so much as bared its teeth at me once," I said. "Explain why it sleeps closest to the door, between me and any entrance, instead of curled up somewhere comfortable." Oscar had no answer for that, though his expression made it clear he wasn't convinced. Around the 18th day, something happened that even the harshest skeptics couldn't dismiss. I was walking through the outer corridor near the storage bay when one of the structural supports gave way without warning. A groan of metal, followed by a shower of debris crashing down exactly where I stood. I didn't even have time to react. Kestrel did. It slammed into me from the side, knocking me clear of the collapse, taking a glancing hit from falling debris across its own shoulder in the process. I hit the ground hard, my ears ringing, dust filling the air, but I was alive, and when I looked up, Kestrel was standing over me, blood trickling from a shallow gash along its side, growling not at me, but at the wreckage itself, as if daring it to fall again. Medical staff rushed in, along with Priya and Oscar, and for a long moment, nobody said anything. They simply stared at the scene. A predator, fully capable of overpowering me in an instant, had just placed itself directly in harm's way to save my life. "That," I said, my voice hoarse from the dust, "is not dominance behavior." Oscar knelt down slowly, examining Kestrel's wound with visible hesitation, and for the first time, I saw something shift in his expression. Not full belief, but doubt in his own certainty. "I need to revise my models," he admitted quietly. "This doesn't match anything in our records." "Because your records came from creatures raised in fear," I said. "Kestrel wasn't raised that way." "Maybe that's the difference." Word of the incident spread through the outpost quickly, and the mood shifted, though not entirely. Some people still crossed the hall to avoid walking near Kestrel. Others began sneaking glances of curiosity rather than pure dread. Priya extended my research window by another 2 weeks, without me even having to ask, though she made it clear the danger wasn't over. "Growing predators can still turn unpredictable," she warned me. "Don't let one good moment convince you nothing can go wrong." I understood her caution, even if I didn't fully share it anymore. By the 25th day, Kestrel had grown to nearly the size of a full adult. Its body now a coiled mass of muscle and instinct. Its claws long enough to shred metal panels with ease, which it demonstrated once by accident, while trying to open a supply crate for me. Its amber eyes had deepened into a burning gold, and when it looked at me now, there was an intelligence there that unsettled even the specialists who had studied its species for years. That was when the real danger arrived, though not from Kestrel at all. A distress signal reached our outpost from a smaller research station 2 days out, warning that an adult Vrascari, likely the parent of the recovered egg clutch, had tracked its offspring's biological signature and was heading directly toward us with clear hostile intent. The message described the adult as enraged, having already damaged 2 vessels attempting to intercept it. "It thinks we stole its young," Oscar said grimly, staring at the tracking data. "In Vrascari culture, that's not just theft, that's an act of war." Priya called an emergency meeting, and this time, fear had returned to every face in the room. "We evacuate the non-essential staff immediately," she ordered. Defense teams to the perimeter. If that creature reaches the outpost, we are not equipped to survive a direct confrontation. There might be another option, I said, my mind racing. Let me try to communicate through Kestrel. If it recognizes its parent, it might be able to calm the situation instead of escalating it. You want to bring a hatchling in front of an enraged adult predator as a peace offering? Oscar asked incredulously. That's not a plan, Callum. That's a death sentence. It's better than hiding behind walls that won't hold, I shot back. You said yourself the adult is tracking Kestrel's biological signature. It's not coming here for us. It's coming here for its child. Maybe if it sees Kestrel as safe, alive, unharmed, it won't see us as enemies. The room fell into tense silence. Priya studied me for a long moment before finally nodding, though her jaw remained tight. If this goes wrong, she said, it goes very wrong. You understand that? I understand, I said, though my pulse was hammering. 2 days later, the sky above the outpost darkened as the adult Vrskari ship descended, massive and jagged, clearly built for both speed and destruction. Every defense system on the ground activated, weapons trained on the incoming vessel, tension thick enough to choke on. I stood at the edge of the landing field with Kestrel beside me, its body rigid, its eyes locked on the descending ship. I could feel the fear radiating through my own chest, but I forced myself to stay still, remembering everything Kestrel had taught me over the past month about trust. The ship landed hard, kicking up a storm of dust, and when the hatch opened, the adult Vrskari emerged. It was enormous, easily 3 times Kestrel's size, its dark hide scarred from what looked like countless encounters, its claws long enough to tear through outpost walls without effort. Its eyes burned with a fury that made my knees weaken, and a deep, bone-rattling growl rolled across the landing field as it stepped forward. Every defense weapon on the perimeter locked onto it, fingers hovering over triggers, but I raised my hand sharply. "Hold your fire," I called out, my voice cracking with the effort. "Everyone hold your fire." The adult's gaze snapped toward me, and for one terrifying second, I thought it would charge, but then its eyes shifted to Kestrel, and something in its posture changed entirely. It let out a sound unlike the growl before, softer, almost broken, and Kestrel responded instantly, moving forward with a chirping call I hadn't heard it make before. The 2 creatures met in the middle of the field, and the adult lowered its massive head, nudging Kestrel gently, checking every inch of its body as if searching for wounds. I held my breath, watching the tension in the air shift from violence to something far more fragile and far more human than anyone expected from a species labeled as pure predators. Then the adult's head rose, and its burning eyes locked onto me again. I forced myself to stand tall, even though every instinct screamed at me to run. "I didn't take your child to harm it," I said slowly, unsure if it could even understand me, but hoping the tone alone might carry meaning. "I protected it. I raised it because it needed someone. I never meant it as an act against your kind." The adult stared at me for a long, agonizing moment, its nostrils flaring as it studied my scent, my posture, the way Kestrel stood beside me without fear. Then, to the shock of every single person watching, it stepped back, lowering its head slightly in what almost looked like a gesture of acknowledgement rather than aggression. Kestrel turned toward me and let out a soft sound, one I had come to recognize as reassurance, and pressed its head briefly against my side, before returning to stand between me and its parent, as if bridging 2 worlds that had never been meant to understand each other. The adult Vrskari remained on the outpost for 3 days. Communicating through a translation device, the specialists managed to configure using patterns Kestrel itself helped establish, bridging gaps in the language that years of previous research had failed to crack. It turned out the species' so-called predatory imprinting behavior wasn't some fixed biological trigger at all. It was a learned response, shaped by generations of captivity, cruelty, and forced separation at the hands of poachers who had hunted Vrskari eggs for decades, selling hatchlings to buyers who trained them through fear and dominance rather than trust. Kestrel had never been trained that way. I had never caged it, never forced it into submission, never treated it as anything other than a living creature capable of choice. And in return, it had chosen loyalty instead of the violence everyone expected. Oscar sat with me on the final evening before the adults' departure, watching Kestrel and its parent rest side by side near the landing field, the tension of the past weeks finally beginning to fade from the outpost, like smoke clearing after a fire. "I've studied this species for 11 years, he said quietly. "I built my entire career on the belief that they were incapable of forming bonds without eventual betrayal. You just proved me wrong in a month." "I didn't prove anything about the species," I said. "I just gave one of them a reason to trust instead of a reason to fear." Oscar nodded slowly, something like respect settling into his expression. "That might be the more important discovery," he admitted. "Not about them, about us." Priya approached us as the sun began to set, her earlier caution replaced with quiet exhaustion and something close to relief. "The Vraskari elder has agreed to a formal treaty discussion," she said. "Apparently, seeing how you treated its offspring changed its opinion of humans entirely. It called your species unpredictable." "That doesn't sound like a compliment," I said, half smiling. "Depends on how you look at it," Priya replied. "Every other species that's encountered them has responded with fear and force. You responded with patience. That's the first time anyone's ever done that, according to the elder." I watched Kestrel in the distance, curled beside its massive parent, its amber eyes half closed in something that looked remarkably like peace. A month ago, this same creature had been marked for termination, feared as an unstoppable killer waiting to happen. Now it stood as proof that fear built on assumption could crumble the moment someone chose understanding instead. The following morning, the adult Vraskari prepared to depart, but Kestrel remained behind, choosing to stay on the outpost rather than return with its parent to their home world. The elder seemed to understand, communicating through the translator that Kestrel's bond with me had become something rare, something worth preserving, rather than breaking apart out of tradition or fear. Before boarding its ship, the adult approached me one final time, lowering its massive head until we were eye level, its burning gaze studying me with an intensity that still sent a chill down my spine, even after everything we had been through. Then it made a sound, low and deliberate, and the translator crackled to life beside me. "Guardian," it said simply, the closest word the device could find. "You are guardian now. Protect what I could not." I swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "I will," I said. "I promise." The ship lifted off minutes later, disappearing into the sky, and the outpost seemed to release a collective breath it had been holding for weeks. Kestrel walked to my side, pressing against me gently, and for the first time since this entire ordeal began, I allowed myself to fully relax. Word of what happened spread far beyond our outpost within days, reaching other colonies, other research stations, even reaching species who had long dismissed humans as reckless or overly sentimental for trusting creatures they didn't understand. But that same trait, the one so many considered a weakness, had just accomplished something years of fear and force had never managed to achieve. I think about that a lot now, walking the corridors of the outpost with Kestrel beside me, watching people who once flinched at its presence now nod in quiet respect as we pass. The galaxy is full of species who judge each other by fear, by assumption, by the worst version of what something might become, rather than what it actually is. Kestrel wasn't born a monster. It wasn't born a guardian either. It became what it became because someone gave it a reason to choose one over the other. Maybe that's the real lesson buried in everything that happened here. Maybe the difference between a predator and a protector was never about the claws, the strength, or the instincts written into its blood. Maybe it was always about who was standing beside it when it had to decide who to become. And every night since, when I walk back to my quarters, Kestrel follows close behind, not because it has to, but because it chooses to, and that choice, more than anything else, is what changed everything.